Amen. I'd like to show you a picture as we start tonight. And as you look at this picture, I want you to tell me about this baby. Give me a word that describes this baby. Precious. Yeah, precious. Give me another word. Adorable. Precious. Adorable. Have you ever seen an ugly baby? You know, as a preacher for over 40 years in local church situations, I've been to the hospital. The most fun visits I've ever had at the hospital, they're always the baby visits. And you always hear words like precious and adorable and stuff like that, beautiful. Well, I've never seen an ugly one. However, I have seen some that trended ugly pretty quick of the male gender. We're kind of good at that, us guys. But when we're born, we're just adorable. Now, I want you to stop and think about that innocent, that dependent human being and the world that they're living in. So what I want you to do is I want you for the next few moments to give me words or phrases that describe the world that we experience life in. Surely 5 or 6. Somebody get us started. Coarse, okay? Coarse. You know, with sandpaper, there are various degrees of coarseness. Sometimes life is a little coarse, and sometimes life is really, really coarse. Harshly coarse. Give me another word or phrase you'd use to describe the world we live in. Unfair. Boy, that's not only true, but sometimes it's even more than unfair. Sometimes it's brutal. It is cruel. There are times that instead of using the contemporary word that's used that some people might be offended by, I'll put it this way: life bites. There are times that life bites. It really bites. And in ways that are just so unfair, so coarse, it's just so harsh. Yeah, life can be that way. Give me another word or phrase to describe the world we live in. Uncertain. Boy, that is spot on. As a matter of fact, it's really interesting in the book of James, which is a book about what Christian living is all about. That was the title of a little devotional book that was written by a brother in the Lord a few decades ago. And with that title, he writes a devotional commentary about various sections in the book of James, what Christian living is all about. He starts that letter out, the book of James, he starts it out by talking about dealing with the trials and troubles and difficulties of life. In the course of that, in James chapter 4, he writes this way, verse 13. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit. You know, every time I read that, I think about a boardroom. And I think about a physical, like hard copy, big map. And these guys are all sitting there in that room, and they're looking at that map. And notice what it says. Notice how arrogant this is. Today or tomorrow, we'll go to such and such a city. I can imagine them pointing to different localities on the map. We'll go to such and such a city. We'll spend a year there. Boy, who knows that you're going to have a whole year, this year or any other year. But they're so cocksure of themselves. Spend a year there, buy and sell. They have decided about their activity. They're just so sure they're going to buy and sell. They're so cocksure, they say they're going to make a profit. Have you ever talked to anybody that started a business and it tanked? And sometimes they've lost everything because they've invested in that company with great hopes and a great game plan. But it was maybe bad timing or bad location. The point that he's making here in James chapter 4 is life is very uncertain, very unpredictable. He says, you do not know what will happen tomorrow. He says, for what is your life? It's even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Yeah, life is very, very unpredictable. Carla was a young lady whose daddy was a preacher in the Chattanooga area. Her husband accepted an assignment to substitute preach for his father-in-law. It's about a 40-minute commute from their house to that church building. And he decided to go there on his motorcycle. So he straps his Bible to the motorcycle and he heads to the church building. But he doesn't get there. The reason he doesn't get there is because there was a teenage boy in a truck that pulled out in front of him. So Carla ends up a young lady in her early 30s with 3 children. He was going to preach the gospel. He was on a holy mission. That's unfair. That's cruel. That just shows you how unpredictable that life can be. Give me another word or phrase that you might use to describe the world we live in. It can be amazing. Things can happen that are just, sometimes on Facebook posts, I'll use the word serendipity. You know, an unexpected blessing. Sometimes things just happen that are so just, it seems like the perfect thing at the perfect time, and so sweet, such a wonderful, wonderful blessing. Certainly not expected, not planned, but something that we really enjoy and embrace. Great things can happen. It can be amazing. Now, I want to show you a picture. And when you look at this picture, what does the picture communicate to you? When you see that picture, what does your brain register? What does it say to you? What does it say? Good versus bad, okay? Good, blessings, bad, burdens, okay? What else does it say? How did you say that? Levels of life, okay? Levels of life. Who else? What do you see in there? More blessings than burdens. Okay. Now, last night and yesterday morning, we talked about everybody having a thinker and a feeler. Now, I've never been a dog or cow. I don't know about those kind of animals, but we human beings, we have a thinker and a feeler. And we live in a broken world where sometimes bad things happen. As a matter of fact, sometimes the bad things that happen and the burdens we bear because of that can really do a number on our thinker and our feeler, to the point where we're not thinking straight and we just cannot see truth or reality in our life. Now, it indicates that they're both burdens and blessings. They're both in the plural. In our life, we have burdens, plural, and we have blessings, plural. It also communicates, if the image is true, there are more blessings than burdens. Now, we're going to go back to the story of Job for a minute and reference something that was alluded to yesterday, but we're going to talk more about it now. Job, remember, lost not just a child, but 10 children, every single one of his children. He lost all of his prosperity. He lost his health. He lost, in a way, the support of his wife. And he was really, really burdened. Now, he was not your average Joe. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, I love reading what God says about Job. Chapter 1, verse 8. The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" Boy, you talk about an accolade there. You talk about a compliment. Put that on my tombstone. Here lies the body of Dean Miller, a servant of God. That is a pretty high-ranking compliment. But he goes on to say, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him on earth, A blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil. In other words, here's a person who's deeply devoted to God. He's got his head screwed on straight. He knows the difference between good and evil. He loves the good. He doesn't want anything to do with the evil. He wants to honor God in his life. Now, you put him in a frying pan. You put him in a pressure cooker. He may be all that, but he's a mere mortal human being. So he says in chapter 14, verse 1, man who is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. Note the word full. This bottle claims to have 16.9 ounces in it, but the water level is right here. Now, if I were to take the top off of this bottle and I were to put a little bit more water in it to the point where it was right up there to the brim, what would we call that? Full. Now, if the bottle's full, what else can you put in it? Nothing. He said his life was full of trouble. You know what we human beings do when we're really struggling? Or when we're on a high, we have a tendency to exaggerate. We will say some things that are not literally consistent with truth or reality. Like, for instance, the wife who's upset at her husband. The trash is still sitting in the kitchen. One of his jobs is to take the trash out. But she snaps because she can't stand it anymore. The trash can is full to overflowing. He's not seeing it. He's not embracing his responsibility. He's not taking the trash out. And she just blows up. You never take the trash out anymore. And then he pulls out his phone and he shows her a video where 2 weeks ago he took the trash out. She said, never. I did too. 2 weeks ago I did. It's right here on my phone. Whenever we're very emotional, we have a tendency to exaggerate. Job said his life was full of trouble. Was his life full of trouble? One of the things that I love to preach about is the blessings of Job. I'm not talking about the blessings of Job prior to all of the burdens. I'm talking about the blessings of Job when he was in the throes of the worst time of his life. Because we forget how blessed he was when he felt so terribly burdened, legitimately feeling so terribly burdened. He was still alive, right? Does that count as a blessing? Have you ever thanked the Lord for the fact that you're alive? Did he have friends? Now, I know what you're going to say. Yeah, but they weren't good ones. I beg to differ with you. I think we have record of great friendship. When you go to Job 2 and verse 11, and it says that they came to him, you know, that's what we need to do. When we have friends who are hurting, when we know people who are hurting, the number one, most important, and most effective help to people who are struggling is the ministry of presence. You know what that takes? It means you get off the merry-go-round of your life, you stop the music, and you go to that person no matter how long it is. How far away did those three friends live? I have no idea, but I know they didn't live right close to him. They had to make an appointment and they came to him. They didn't send him a text and say, Job, hey, we heard you hit on hard times. Here's our address. How about you coming over here and you can stay with us for a while? They didn't do that. They dropped everything in their life and they came to him. Boy, that is great friendship. Not only that, they came for the right reason. It says in chapter 2, verse 11, they came to mourn and comfort him. Have you ever thought about the fact that everything that they said, when they made the mistake of opening their big fat mouth and started spewing forth their abundant wisdom from their perspective about Job's situation, did you ever think about the fact they meant no harm whatsoever? They came to mourn and comfort him. They came with the best of intentions. Take note of the fact that sometimes people with the best intentions can become most hurtful if we don't know how to serve them in their time of need. That's why we need less grief illiteracy, especially in the church. And we need more knowledge about how to effectively minister to grieving people and what the grief journey is all about. Not only that, but it says in the next verse, verse 12, they raised their eyes from afar. They did not recognize him. They lifted up their voice and they wept. Rejoice with those that rejoice. Weep with those that weep. Each one tore his robe, sprinkled dust on his head toward heaven. They sat down with him, ministry of presence again, sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights. No one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was great. Let me share with you a kind of idolatry that we are sometimes guilty of, that we need to recognize. You know, when we think of idolatry, we think of an image, a physical image that you can touch, you can see, and that we bow down to. Well, no, that's a very narrow perspective about idolatry. How about a person who is so concerned about their comfort zone that they will not do the will of God in going to another person who's hurting because it would disrupt their comfort zone? That's a form of idolatry. The comfort zone is the God. There are times that people will not go and be with other folks who are struggling because it might bring up some painful memories. I've got good news for all of us. Our life's not about us. We need to be thinking about others. We need to be thinking about God's will for us in the life of others. It could be painful. It could incite in us emotions that are difficult to handle, maybe because of things that we've experienced in the past, or because of how much we love them, and we empathize with them, and we're struggling with them. Forget about the effect it's going to have on you. Throw yourself under the bus. Be with those people no matter what impact it has on you. Show them, prove to them by your life, you love them. And whatever effect it has on you, you want to help them because you love them. He had 3 awesome friends. He was not friendless. My suspicion is he had a lot of friends. These 3 are just noted. As a matter of fact, whenever I have a chance to talk about how to minister to people who are hurting, my very first suggestion is be like Job's friends. Then my second suggestion is don't be like Job's friends after they opened their mouth. The less said, the better. Again, I'll mention it. If you've not Googled it yet, dumb things caring people say. When you read that list, brace yourself because there'll probably be things on that list that you've said, that I've said. Grief illiteracy causes us sometimes, even though we might have a compassionate heart, to say and do things that are actually not helpful. It's just the opposite. They're hurtful. There are people sitting right here in this room that I know have experienced that. The ministry of presence is very important. He was so blessed. He was alive. He had friends so devoted that they came to him in his hour of need. He was married. It's a lot different dealing with the difficulties of life married as opposed to dealing with the difficulties of life alone. When you have nobody to help you carry that burden, nobody to be that sounding board, nobody to be your cheerleader, your helper, your advisor, your counselor, life's a lot different. He was blessed to be married. She may not have been the perfect wife, but there isn't one and never has been, nor is there a perfect husband. But what a blessing he had to be married. He had a God in heaven who loved him, a God in heaven who knew what he was going through, a God in heaven who knew what was going on inside of him, a God who could provide for his every need as he walked through that storm in his life. And yet he says his life was full of trouble. No, Job, your life was not full of trouble. It was full of blessings and burdens. If you were to take this bottle and take that top off and drink it down right to here, what do we call it? What do we call it? Half what? Full. Or full. You could call it half empty, you could call it half full, or you could call it full. What's it full of if the water level's right here? It has water and air. All of our lives have blessings. A lot of blessings. As a matter of fact, we have more blessings than we have burdens, but that may not be the way we feel. But your feelings are not always consistent with reality. Don't let your feeler be the one that communicates to you your truth. Because the reality is your feeler doesn't know everything. Your feeler can sometimes run inconsistent with reality. There's never a time in our lives that we're more burdened than blessed. Now, there are times in our life we feel more burdened than blessed, but that doesn't change the fact. In all of our lives, we're more blessed than we're burdened. We need to remind ourselves to do something that we occasionally sing about. How many times have you sat in a worship service and observed the Passover? The Christian Passover. That's where we come into the big room. I don't like calling it the auditorium. The big room. When you come into the auditorium on Sunday and you're together with your brothers and sisters in the Lord, how many times have you observed the Passover? Now, here's what I mean by that. You look at the screen, or maybe you look at the hard copy songbook, and you know the melody, and you've sung that melody 1,000,000 times. It's ingrained in you. You could be awakened at 2 o'clock in the morning, and somebody challenge you, what's the melody of Count Your Blessings? Maybe not on key, but you can sing the melody. What about the words? We need to realize that sometimes we don't concentrate and we don't focus. And sometimes we sing the melody, but we don't think enough about the words. That's why I love to hear new songs, because they cause me to think, and my thinker is driven by the lyrics. And I'm always wondering, what's the point? What's the object? What's the goal? What are these lyrics trying to achieve in me? But songs that we've sung so many times, we'll sing the melody and we'll pass over the lyrics or message. From this point forward, anytime when you're in a public worship service and you sing this song, I want you to be even more careful than you've ever been before about watching the lyrics and what they communicate. I'm going to ask you to sing this song with me. Please don't make me sing a solo. This particular version has 4 verses. We're going to sing all 4 verses and the chorus only at the end. And when we sing this song, you know the melody. Watch real careful the words and notice how so valuable this reminder is. It's really consistent with what we've just talked about. When upon life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. high. When you look at others with their lands and gold, think that Christ has promised you His wealth untold. Count your many blessings money cannot buy, your reward in heaven or your home on high. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, angels will attend, help and comfort give you to your journey's end. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Let me tell you about a come to Jesus time in my life. It was July 14, 2013. I brought my wife home from the hospital. On the night of July 11th, 2013, she was in our home starving to death and dehydrating. She could not speak. She hadn't eaten for a long time. She couldn't swallow. It's hard to be a caregiver to somebody who cannot talk to you and tell them what they need. The only way we could communicate and I could understand any kind of response is eye contact. Up to this point, up to July 11th, 2013, she had chosen not to have a feeding tube. And that's why she was dehydrating and dying, starving to death. On that night, with her eyes, she communicated to me finally. I called 911. I had her picked up and taken to the hospital in Canton, Ohio. And the next morning, on July 12th, they put in a feeding tube. There was some adjusting there, both for me as the caregiver and for her and her physical body. On July 14th, I brought her home. I was standing in front of the oven, the stove, in our kitchen, and something dawned on me. For all the years that we've been married, I, of course, had always led us in prayer, thanking God for the food that we were about to eat. But never once had I ever thanked God for the ability to eat the food. Never once. I do now. Not every time, but many times. I'll not only thank the Lord for the food, but I'll thank Him for the ability to eat. There are a lot of people in the world we live in who cannot eat. They can't eat because they don't have access to food. And then there's people who cannot eat because they cannot swallow. And the only way they live and the only nutrition they're getting is through a tube. It was on that date of July 14, I promised myself I would never bring food into the house again. Because you know what the smell of food does? Whenever we smell that food, I never wanted her to smell what she couldn't taste. So I would eat in the garage or I would eat outside. I never cooked in the house for the rest of the time that she was living, those next 5 months. Have you ever thanked the Lord for the ability to get up out of a chair by yourself? Have you ever thanked the Lord for the ability to breathe without thinking? Has it ever struck you? It strikes me now. When I see people in public, they're carrying these tanks, either a pack over their shoulder or a tank on wheels, and they have this tube that runs up to their nose because they're struggling with the ability to breathe. Have you ever thanked the Lord for the ability to breathe? Have you ever thanked the Lord for the ability to get up out of bed? There were many, many days my wife never could get out of bed without assistance. And then there became a time when even with assistance, she couldn't get up out of bed. You want to become more grateful? You want to really count your blessings in a way that'll be impactful? Number one, think. And number two, think specifically. Don't think generically. You know, it is so easy for us to observe the Passover in prayer by saying, "Thank you, Lord, for all my physical blessings." Well, what physical blessings are you talking about? If you want deep gratitude, if that's where you want to go in your life, I mean an impactful, deep gratitude in your life, think and think specifically. And thank the Lord specifically for the blessings that you have. You know what I miss most about worshiping now? Is sitting next to my wife, and when that corporate group is being led in prayer, holding her hand. I remember being at the University City Church in Gainesville, Florida one night, and it just so happened somebody was visiting there from Middle Tennessee that I knew, who was withered in her 50s, and we'd spent time on the phone, and as a matter of fact, we'd spent some time together on occasion, and she happened to be there at that same church visiting that I was that night, and she was sitting to my left. And whenever we were led in public prayer, she did what I was intending to do, but she did it first. She reached over and held my hand. Do you have somebody like that in your life? That when you sit and worship or when you pray at home, you can hold their hand? One of the things that my wife lost that I've come to appreciate a whole lot more is she lost the ability to hug. Have you ever thanked the Lord for the ability to hug and to have somebody in your life to hug? I remember one day putting Brooklyn as a baby into her bed at home, her hospital bed in home. And I laid Brooklyn there, and Brooklyn kind of got a hold of her cheeks like this, but my wife did not have the ability to raise her hand or her arms and hug that grandbaby of hers. See, when you stop to think about specifics, you really can be overwhelmed with not just the magnitude of the blessings, but how innumerable that they are, how precious that they are. Now, the problem with blessings, I mean, they are great, but the problem with blessings is often we don't get to keep our blessings as long as we would like. But when we have them, we grow to love them. Now, some blessings we become intentionally attached to. Some blessings we become unintentionally attached to. Does anybody remember the name of the movie that you see on the screen? Christmas Story. I just love the day that that's on for 24 hours. Well, Christmas Story, this is 1983 when it was filmed. But does anybody know where it was filmed? Where? No. It was filmed real close to Lake Erie, a large urban city near Lake Erie. You can even go and visit the house. Somebody bought it a little over a year ago. Somebody bought this house. It's really cool to be able to go there at Christmas time. Anybody know where? Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland rocks. That's the song. Cleveland rocks. Somebody with such worthless knowledge deserves to be rewarded. So this is what my family calls our golden chest of prizes. And because he has that worthless knowledge between his ears, I'm going to let him dig into this box and take a prize home. Anything that he wants out of our golden chest of prizes. Now, in this chest of prizes, if you want some clothespins, those can become very, very handy. If you like Buc-ee's, we've got some Buc-ee buddies in here. If you need something to help you open jars, there's a widow lady who actually made these, and these are not hot pads, but they're assistance in opening jars that are hard. Now, if you like these fruit cakes, or if you need to pound some nails and you don't have a handy hammer nearby, you're welcome to take this. But I want you to feel free to dig into the golden chest of prizes. Michael, will you take this back there? Let him dig into the golden chest of prizes. And before we leave, I need to get a picture of you with your prize that you picked out of there so that my family can make it a point of knowing about your great wisdom in picking the right thing. You can dig all the way to the bottom of the box if you'd like. He got the clothespins. Obviously, he's wanting to assist his wife in hanging her clothes out on the clothesline. Well, by the way, on YouTube, you can plug in Triple Dog Dare, and you can enjoy this scene without watching the whole movie. Now, does anybody know the name of the boy whose tongue is stuck to the cold pole? Michael will take you the golden chest of prizes if you know. Don't pick up your phone. Close. That's the other boy. Who's the other boy? Flick. Bing, bing, bing. Michael, take that box back there to that man. He deserves a prize. Not very many people have that useless knowledge in their brain. Okay, Flick is his name. Now, do you think Flick intended to get his tongue stuck to the pole? Now, have you ever thought about that when we have a blessing, over time and experience, how attached, unintentionally attached, we can become? Now, when you get that four-legged critter and you bring that critter of whatever variety it is, you bring it home. Now, it's a PET. What does it morph into over time with experience? Family. It's a member of your family. It's your kid. Some people are grandparents of animals. Now, let me tell you about Jackie. Jackie had a dog. She lives down in Titusville, Florida. And Jackie had a dog, and her dog died during the COVID period. During the COVID period, there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of hibernation. Well, she wanted to take this dog to a pet cemetery. Do you know there are pet cemeteries? I've gone and visited some pet cemeteries just to take pictures to prove to people that there are some really nice pet cemeteries. By the way, why would anybody go to the trouble and expense of burying a PET in a pet cemetery? Because they became very attached to it. Well, Jackie's dog died. She couldn't go several miles to where this pet cemetery was, where she was going to lay the body of that dog to rest. So she stuck it in her freezer. When my 10-year-old granddaughter heard that story, she was frightened by her facial expression. Quite a while after that, that frozen dog was taken out of the freezer, taken to that location and buried. One widow lady told me that her husband had 3 dogs that just lit up his life. He loved those dogs. So as those dogs died, after he died, she took every one of those dogs as they died and buried them right above him at the cemetery. That's how attached we can become. Unintentionally attached we can become to our blessings. Now, last night we mentioned some of this, but just quick review. Name me a blessing that we could become so attached to that if we lost it, it would have an effect on us. Your house. That house is just a house. It has a monetary value, but people lived in that house. And people had experiences in that house that cultivated significant relationships. And when all you have left is the memories, and that house has been destroyed by a tornado, or maybe a hurricane, or a flood, you're going to grieve. It's going to have an effect on you. As a matter of fact, you may really, because you love that house, you may really be affected by that in a way that you never thought you would, because it's just a house. But we have sentimental value that we add to any monetary value of something. Name me something else that you could lose that might shake you up. How about a job? A job can become to a great extent, our identity if we let it. What are you? I'm a preacher. Who are you? I'm a nurse. Well, let me share with you a line out of a book written by a woman who lost her husband. She said, I am a widow, but a widow is not who I am. I had to read that statement numerous times because I have a hard time sometimes understanding how women think. So I kept reading that and I kept reading. What is she getting at? Identity. Identity. I am a widow, but a widow is not who I am. There are a lot of things that we can experience in this life that we can permit to become our identity. And it becomes so precious and important to us that if we lose it, we react as if we've lost our identity. We really haven't, but we've let that thing, that experience, become our identity. I've got great news for you. If you're elderly, you may think I'm a senior citizen, but a senior citizen is not who you are. If you've got cancer, you may be a cancer patient, but that's not who you are. Our identity has nothing to do with what we experience in this life. It has nothing to do with what we possess in this life. Our identity is our connection with God. Who am I? What is my identity? I am a creature who exists in the image of God, and I live in His likeness. If I'm a Christian, I'm redeemed by the blood of Jesus, and I am a child of God. That is my identity. You are not your age. You are not your health condition. You are not your marital status. But the reality is, sometimes we let these things become our identity as we perceive them. And then when we have that identity altered or we lose it, we're shaken by that. The point that I'm trying to make is there's a lot of things that we could lose in this life that could really shake us up, and we struggle. Last night we talked about life, love. Life plus love plus loss equals what? Grief. And that grief is going to have a profound effect on our life. Last night I made a reference to a statement in this book called The Grieving Brain. I want to read to you a part of this book. This book was written by a neuroscientist who's also a psychologist, a counselor. She has spent decades in her life. She's done the MRIs, she's done the CT scans, she's done the therapy work, she's done the interviews, she's done her homework. In this book, let me read to you a section that you've not been introduced to yet. It has to do with the struggle that goes on between our ears when we've suffered great loss. She calls them intrusive thoughts. Aren't there times that you wish that you could just delete a thought out of your brain? You just wish that there was a button on the side of your head you could push and delete, because that intrusive thought, you don't want that thought. You want to get it out of there. You don't want it in your brain. So here's her remarks about intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts arise for extremely emotional events, including those that are positive. They are not reserved for extremely negative events. But because intrusive thoughts of negative events upset us, we worry about what these unwanted thoughts mean about our mental health. Most of the time, and especially in acute grief, intrusive thoughts are simply what our brain does naturally in order to learn from these important emotional events. When considered from the brain's perspective, our brain is assessing our thoughts of our loss over and over again. It does the same for important positive events. It is still unpleasant to be caught off guard, to have your thoughts and feelings turn to grief. But your brain is bringing them up in order to try to understand what has happened. In the same way that you may share memories and stories with friends to talk them through and gain a deeper understanding. When you think of intrusive thoughts this way, it feels more normal that they happen. Your brain is doing this for a reason. They seem to be functional and less like a sign that you are not handling your grief well. Just this afternoon, I was talking to a lady who lives in the San Antonio, Texas area, who today is the 14th anniversary of when her and her husband were married. But he died in 2022. She's had some intrusive thoughts today because that anniversary date brings up those memories. She told me that early on, she was struggling so much with what was going on inside of her head that she went to her local preacher, Johnny McCarran, and she said, "Johnny, I need help. I'm a mess. My head is just all messed up." I wish I had $1 for every person who has suffered great loss, who has said to me, quote, "I thought I was going crazy." No, you're not going crazy. You may think you are, but that's not consistent with reality. The reality is you are grieving, and that's a very natural and normal thing for you to be a mess and to have a lot of these intrusive thoughts. As a matter of fact, that's a part of your needed therapy. You need to have these times when you are very emotional and these times when you're sorting things out in your brain, because that's what your brain wants to do. Your brain wants to figure this out. And just like your brain is prompted to really kick into high gear when it sees something that's threatening, your brain also is disturbed by the absence of something that it's become used to registering in the neurons popping between your ears. It's hard to give up your blessings. Life gifts you blessings. When life gives us blessings, it's really a wonderful thing, and we have a bunch of them. But life also gifts you burdens. We don't want those. Nobody wants burdens, but life gifts us burdens just like it does blessings. Now, what do you women do? Now, let's be honest. Would you please, women, be honest with me? What do you do with a gift that you've been given you don't want? Re-gift it, okay? Life has gifted you loss. You want to re-gift that to somebody? Nobody with a heart would want to do that. Now, there are other things you can do with that unwanted gift. What are they? Donate it. Isn't that generous? You're donating. Now, it didn't cost you anything. You didn't want it anyway, but that is a very clever way of responding when you get a gift you don't want. Now, can you donate your loss? Nope. What else would you women do? You're really sneaky. You're really good at this. You get a gift you don't want, what do you do with it? Yard sale. Bing, 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 bing. You can get money for it. You didn't pay a thing for it, but you could put it out in the yard sale and you could get your money for it. Now, you see, the problem with burdens is they're gifts that life gives us, and we can't always exchange them. Now, there are times life can gift you ill health, but by the grace of God, you might be able to get your health back. Praise the Lord if that occurs. But when it comes to loss, the loss of a loved one by death, you're stuck with it. It doesn't matter where you go, what you do, how much you try to get rid of it, you can't. You're stuck with it. What we have to learn to do is learn to live with it. That's why these workshops are called Living with Loss. We have to learn to live with our losses. I'm a widower, but a widower is not who I am. But I'm going to take this widowed marital status and I'm going to use it for the glory of God by raising awareness about the power of loss and try to encourage people who are experiencing great loss in their life. So you can take this terrible burden and you can use it to actually glorify God and help others. Some of you who are older will remember this fella by the name of Batsell Barrett Baxter. And Brother Baxter wrote a book called When Life Tumbles In. And in that book, I want to share with you an observation that he made. In that book, he says this: when we must carry heavy burdens, we receive our greatest help not from those who, having never carried similar burdens, stand on the sidelines and give bland advice, but from those who have been through the same valleys and have suffered the same problems. Who's going to help that cancer patient who's looking down the road at chemo treatments that are going to cause them to lose their hair and puke their guts out, and maybe go through surgeries that are going to be extremely scary? Who's going to be the best help to that person? Somebody who's been there and done that. How about the parent who's lost a child, either by miscarriage or sometime after birth? Somebody who's been there and done that. See, we can take the burdens that we have to live with, that are a part of our story. They don't have to become our identity. We don't need them to be that. We shouldn't let them be that, because our identity is our connection with God. But we can take that part of our story and use it for the glory of God by helping others. And that's what I challenge all of us to do, whatever the loss is. Now, quickly, I want to share with you something that will help you be more patient with yourself and with others. This will just take a couple of minutes. I'm going to save you reading 200 pages of a book that was introduced to me by Jerry Barber. It's a book with one word title, Transitions. The subtitle is Making Sense of Life's Changes. Outstanding book. In this book, what this expert in the field, he travels the world, helping organizations and helping companies learn how to navigate transitions successfully. In this book, he clarifies the fact that an inevitable experience in life is change. Some of the changes are chosen. Some of you may have chosen to move here from some other place. Some of us have chosen to change our occupation. We went from being single to being married. I hope it wasn't a shotgun wedding. You did it, you chose to do it, okay? But then there are also changes that are forced on us. Nobody chooses loss. That's something life gifts you. It forces you to deal with it. Now, whether it's a chosen or forced change, what that creates is an end and a new beginning. The change means something's ended and then a new beginning. Now, the problem with that is, this isn't like flipping a switch. Because to get to your new beginning and to have a life that's going to be different from your previous life because of your great loss, you can't go back to normal. When you've suffered great loss, going back to normal is not realistic. You can't do that. But what you can do is you can create a new normal for yourself. What do you want that new beginning to be after you've suffered great loss? What are you going to do with the fact you're stuck with the loss? Well, to get to your new beginning, you've got to go through a forest. And this is the way I describe it. This picture is of a forest that's weird. It's a forest where there's no pathway, there's no footprints, but there are people. It's a phase in your life when, after you've been forced to deal with the reality of change, you're going to have to interact with people, and some of these people are going to be helpful, and they're going to be encouraging. But there are probably going to be even more people who are not going to be helpful. They're going to be neglectful. Hopefully not because they don't care. Usually it's because we don't know. If we don't know that a person is struggling, or we don't know what that struggle is like, we're likely to be neglectful. But if we have a compassionate heart and we know what that person is going through, we know a little bit about it, it's then that we can minister to them effectively. So there are going to be some helpful people, but there are going to be some people who are not going to be helpful. Remember, dumb things caring people say. Sometimes people can do things, they can say things that are not helpful. As a matter of fact, they are hurtful. You have to put a lid on your lip. You have to be careful not to be actively responsive to things that are hurtful to you. It's called, in his book, it's called a neutral zone. And what he explains in this book is, whenever we're going through this change, especially if it's lost and it's forced on it, we didn't want it, we've got to learn to deal with it. We've got to be patient with ourselves. We're not going to be ourselves. We're not going to think like we used to think. We're going to have trouble with our feeler. It's going to want to be dominant in our life, and that could really be negative, could be very bad for us. But he says what we've got to do, we've got to be patient with ourselves, and we've got to be patient with others while we're in this transitional period in our life. How long do you spend in that forest before you get to the other side, to the new beginning? I have no idea, nor do you. That's why we just need to keep waiting on the Lord. There's sometimes in your life, you're just in your reality of being present in the waiting room of the Lord. You're kind of like that critter inside of the cocoon. And the cocoon should not be broken open until the right time. You're kind of like the egg in the incubator that should not be removed from the incubator until the right time. And there's a reason why sometimes we're in God's waiting room. It's in that waiting room sometimes we can grow like we've never grown before. We may not want to be there, but because of the Lord and with the Lord, we can end up becoming a better, stronger, even more a person of faith than we've ever been before. Because we have been driven to our knees by the upset that loss has forced us to deal with. I hope this has helped a little bit, maybe in your personal life, and maybe has been helpful for you to be more effective in helping other people. Nobody helps other people perfectly. We are all going to make mistakes. And nobody is going to gracefully go through this neutral zone period. We're just mere mortal human beings. We're all struggling in a broken world, and nobody is Captain America spiritually, or Superman, or Wonder Woman spiritually. We need to be patient with ourselves and with others. Let's spend a moment in prayer. Thank you very much for coming. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for your love and blessings. Be with us, Father, as we struggle with our burdens. We can get so mixed up, so confused, and sometimes be threatened by the awful things that we experience in this life. Father, keep us from the evil one. Give us the strength when we're in the storm of loss to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep trying to serve you, even though sometimes we may not feel like that. But we know we need to be like that. Help us to be the person you want us to be, and help us to serve others with a compassionate heart. It's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. I finish with this one comment. If I were asked by somebody, hey, I can't come to every session in that workshop of yours. Give me one, and I'll make the time to be there. It's tomorrow. We're going to narrow it down and talk about life after loss, when the loss is your husband or your wife. What's it like to be widowed? It was because I was clueless about what that was like. I neglected widowed people for decades in my life, but I will not do that anymore, because I know, both from experience as well as by reading, what other people have experienced after the loss of their spouse. I really hope that you'll be here tomorrow. Feel free to bring anybody that you can, especially those who are married. There's only one way a good marriage ends. Only one. It would be good to know something about that before it happens. Somebody's left behind. I encourage you to bring married people, as well as people who've been through the loss of a spouse. Thank you very much.